next time I'll have my cartos. I forgot. Usually I always have them right beside me, but anyway, they're in the temple and I'm not in the temple. Om Jnana Timirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurum Militam Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Stapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadah Mahyam Tarati Sva Padantikam Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Shrimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Pastyatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shiva Shari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Panchakalpatarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhyevacha, Patitanam Pavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So today we will be speaking on the following verse in the series of this chapter, and in the verse after the next one actually begins the 5 essential verses of this chapter. So I will read the verse and the translation. If you would like to put the verse on the screen, that would be, this is 1-2, Srimad Bhagavatam 1-2-15. Yaranudhyasina yukta karma granthi nibadhanam chindanti kovidastasya kona kurvat katharatim. Translation and purport by Srila Prabhupada. With the sword in hand, intelligent men cut through the binding knots of reactionary work, karma, by remembering the personality of Godhead. Therefore, who will not pay attention to his message? The contact of the spiritual spark with material elements creates a knot which must be cut if one wants to be liberated from the actions and reactions of fruitive work. Liberation means freedom from the cycle of reactionary work. This liberation automatically follows for one who constantly remembers the transcendental pastimes of the personality of Godhead. This is because all the activities of the Supreme Lord, his Leela, are transcendental to the modes of material energy. They are all attractive spiritual activities, and therefore constant association with the spiritual activities of the Supreme Lord gradually spiritualizes the conditioned soul and ultimately severs the knot of material bondage. So I'm going to stop in this part of the purport just to make a few points that actually, so Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he gave an example in this particular, regarding this particular part of the purport. He says, of course, this is in the old days of India, people would put money in their cloth because people in those days, people would use, they weren't wearing pants and shirts or dresses. They wore some kind of cloth that you could easily make a little knot and put some money in it. So he compares that to accruing karmic activities. when we're doing this and we get some reaction, we're doing this, we get some reaction, and that creates a whole difficulty for all of us. So his recommendation is that one understands that these activities are not meant for us. Now here it says, Kona kuryat kataratim. This is said many times throughout the Bhagavatam. Who would not pay attention to this message? Otherwise, now, just going to the verse again, anudya. Anudya means remembrance. Anudyasina means the sword. So the sword that we're talking about here is remembering the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the instrument, that is the vehicle that will cut this knot. Now, there's two types of knots. This is the knot, this is called karma granthi. And later on in the last verse that we'll speak of in this series, verse number 21, it speaks of hridaya granthi, which is also spoken of by Rishabdev. So these, whether it's hridaya granthi or karma granthi, means you cut the knots of reactionary work, and hridaya granthi means you cut the knots of the subtle and gross desires to enjoy this world. So basically the same thing, but it's like, this is the first step, and therefore this verse comes first, and the other verse comes at the end of the series. So it speaks here that the Lord, his lila, we should understand, how do we get access to the Supreme Personality of Godhead? How do we get access to devotional service? So Vishwanath Chakravarti says, the qualification for entering into bhakti is faith, having faith in the topics of the Lord. And I will, a little later on, I will speak about some verses from the Bhagavatam, which are very famous verses and which help us to understand the nature of faith. And maybe we can put those verses up when we come to that point. So here specifically, Srila Prabhupada mentions his lila, Krishna's lila. So the progression given by Jiva Goswami is nama, rupa, guna, lila. First, we become absorbed in the names of the Lord. And of course, Jiva Goswami also recommends that before any activity in Krishna consciousness, we should chant the holy name. And after that activity, because this is the most important thing. And the name is the seed. He explains the name is the seed, although it itself is perfection. As we say, Nam Namakari Bahuda Nija Sarva Shaktis. The name of the Lord has all the potencies of the Lord. Abhinatvam Nama Namino. There's no difference between the Lord and his name. But from the name, when we recite the name, within the names, we find so many wonderful things. And from the name, we find verses, mantras, where we find the form of the Lord, and then the qualities of the Lord, and then finally the pastimes of the Lord. All these are contained within the names, and they sprout from the names. But we should concentrate in the beginning in the names, chanting the holy name, especially the Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And then we can progress. So I'll go on and read this next paragraph. Liberation from material bondage is therefore a byproduct of devotional service. Attainment of spiritual knowledge is not sufficient to ensure liberation. This is a very important statement. Even within our movement, we have many courses nowadays, Bhakti Shastri, and all kinds of courses. And these courses are very wonderful. But if we don't, as Krishna recommends in Bhagavad Gita, Jnana Vijnana Sahitam, that together with jnana or knowledge should be vijnana or realization. Otherwise, how do I put this knowledge into practice? If we don't do that, then it's, as it says here, it will not ensure liberation. But here in the beginning, it says liberation is a byproduct of devotional service. So Srila Prabhupada continues, such knowledge must be overcoated with devotional service so that ultimately devotional service alone predominates. Then liberation is possible. Even the reactionary work of fruitive workers can lead one to liberation when it is overcoated with devotional service. Karma overcoated with devotional service is called karma yoga. Similarly, empirical knowledge overcoated with devotional service is called jnana yoga, or jnana misra bhakti. But pure bhakti yoga is independent of such karma and jnana. Anyabilashita shunyam jnana karma dhyanavitam, as Rupa Goswami says, that pure devotional service has three characteristics. It's free from all types of unnecessary desires. And unnecessary desire really means any desire other than wanting to please Krishna. And then he says karma, jnana karma anavritam, free, totally free. But now, I wanted to refer now to some to the Bhagavatam, and especially to the Brihat Bhagavatamrita. And so it says that bhakti. So how do we get this bhakti? In the Bhagavatam, in the 11th canto, when Krishna is speaking with Uddhava. So Uddhava says, he starts speaking about pious, impious activities, and how do we, because pious and impious activities, or the definition of them, everything ultimately comes from Krishna and from the Vedas, therefore they're coming from Krishna. So why does Krishna give them to us, and why, and how do we overcome it? This was his basic question. So Krishna says to Uddhava, and we can, if it's possible, we can put this verse, 11 canto, chapter 20, verse number 9. I recommend every devotee to seriously study this 20th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, the 11th canto. Is very, very deep and very enriching for our devotional service. So anyway, so we'll just read that verse. And tavat karmani kurvita na nirvidyate yavata madgata shravanadova shraddhayavan najayate. So as long as one is not satiated by fruitive activity and has not awakened his taste for devotional service by Shravanam Kirtanam Vishnu, one has to act according to the regulative principles of Vedic injunctions. So what does that mean? It means that as long as we are attracted by fruitive activity, as long as we're not, just like I was speaking to someone today who just had an operation, and because this operation, they had to go through the top of the skull and go under the muscles and repair some bones. And this lady devotee, her head swelled up like this, like and up in a cone, looked like, I think there's some cartoon characters, they have like cone-shaped heads. She said she felt like applying in Hollywood but she said, now I realized when this happened to me, how much I'm attached to my body. So as long as we're attached to the body, the mind, fruitive activities, then we should follow the system of Varnashram. That's what it's basically saying here. Krishna is saying that we should follow Varnashram Dharma. And then there's an explanation in an earlier chapter about Varnashram. So the regulative principles of Vedic injunctions. Of course, if one understands, as Krishna says, Vedaischa Sarvayadaham eva Vedyo, that I am the goal of the Vedas, then to acting according to the regulative principles would be acting according to the principles of Bhagavad Gita. This is the position of a devotee in Krishna consciousness, to accomplish this. Otherwise, when we're studying Bhagavad Gita, when we're following sadhana bhakti, this is what we're doing. But because we're still conditioned, we're following these regulative principles. So this faith must develop more and more and more. And therefore, the Bhagavatam, two very beautiful verses. This is, I don't know if we can put just the verse. You can put the verse 11, 11, 23. We're not going to, I'm not going to read the verse. I'm going to read the translation, but I'm reading a shorter translation. Well, I can read the translation given here actually. And yes, it's hard to get there quickly. You know, 11, 11, 23. I just want everyone to see these verses so that you can note them. These are very beautiful verses that speak about developing faith. So here's the verse, and I will read the translation myself, because that way it's you can see the verse and see how the words correspond. So the translation, my dear Uddhava, narrations of my pastimes and qualities are all auspicious and purify the whole universe. Subhadra Loka Pavani. And therefore, whoever sings Gaya and Anushmanam, whoever sings and hears and glorifies and remembers such transcendental activities, who through dramatic performances relives the pastimes. Otherwise, here Krishna himself is saying we should have theater. It's not that theater is just something entertaining. This is an important aspect of developing faith in Krishna. And beginning with my appearance, Janma Karma Chame Divyam, as Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, and whoever takes full shelter of me, dedicating religious, sensual, occupational activities for my satisfaction. And well, that means that kama or moksha, dharma, kama, and artha. If one that's what we're doing. Otherwise, everyone who's practicing Krishna consciousness, all of us, and especially grihastas, because they have to deal with these things. They have to deal with artha. They have to deal with kama, their desires, the children's desires, social activities. These are important. So here, Krishna is recommending social activities. What are those social activities? Theater, dramatic performances that relive his pastimes. Actually, we're coming up to on Nityananda's appearance day, and Nityananda, when he was 5 years old, he would enact all of Krishna's pastimes, and his father and his mother and all the parents of his friends where is he learning this? He hasn't read the scriptures. We haven't told it to him. Where is it coming from? So, and Lord Chaitanya himself enacted many of Krishna's pastimes, and he organized these things. And of course, Swarup Damodar, famous for this. And then the last part, certainly obtains unflinching devotional service to me, the eternal personality of Godhead. So this is how we develop our faith. We hear about Krishna. People always ask me, how can I chant japa better? And I say, the last thing you do, hear about Krishna. Hear about Krishna. And chant his glories and his pastimes, especially pastimes and qualities. That's what's being emphasized here. But to get to pastimes and qualities, we have to chant the holy name, and we have to worship Krishna's form, especially the deity form. So now if we can, sorry for jumping around a little bit, if we can go back to the verse itself, I will read the last paragraph of Srila Prabhupada's purport. Oh, I do want to mention one more thing about this particular purport, this particular aspect. So here we're speaking about Jnana Misra Bhakti, Karma Misra Bhakti. But actually, as Uddhava did in the verse that I spoke of before, and in this verse, they are not recommended. No. They especially for devotees, we don't practice. No. Devotees try to avoid. And that's the importance of taking shelter under a spiritual master. Spiritual master guides us in pure bhakti, because pure bhakti is much more important than these things, than gradually elevating ourselves. And we don't have the time for, especially for Jnana Misra Bhakti. That means, but sometimes we have an attraction for Gyan, or we have an attraction for karma. So these things enter in, but by practicing devotional service under the shelter of the spiritual master, as it says here, one can transcend them. And now we'll read the last paragraph. Therefore, any sensible man who is above the average man with a poor fund of knowledge must constantly remember the personality of Godhead by hearing about him, glorifying him, by remembering him, and by worshiping him always. Now here, Srila Prabhupada in his purport is referring to the previous verse, verse 14, where Shrotavya Kirtitavyas Cha Jayas Pujas Chanityada. So Prabhupada is, sometimes all of our acharyas, they do this sometimes, especially Srila Prabhupada and Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. A verse may be there and they may refer to that verse 3 or 4 purports later. So that is the perfect way of devotional service. The Goswamis of Vrindavan, who were authorized by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to preach the Bhakti cult, rigidly followed this rule and made immense literatures of transcendental science for our benefit. They have chalked out ways for all classes of men in terms of different castes and orders of life in pursuance of the teachings of Srimad Bhagavatam and similar other authoritative scriptures. So, this is, so there's another verse I wanted to mention from the 11th canto. And if you like, you can project this. This is very, I always refer devotees to these 2 verses also, 11, 20, 27, 28. I always tell devotees, if you're worried about that you still have some attraction to sense gratification, these are the verses for you. In this way, Krishna helps us to be able to deal with our desires for sense gratification. Of course, we're not talking about gross sinful activities. We're talking about desire to enjoy this world through family life, through economic development, etc. So, but this is a these are two very important verses. And so I'm not going to read them, but I will refer to them. Well, I'll just read a little bit. Jata Shraddho Matkatasu. When one develops faith in hearing about Krishna, Nirvina Sarvakarmashu. I'll just go through the verse instead of reading the verse itself. Nivina Sarvakarmashu. And when one becomes disgusted, understanding that one gives up, disgusted, finished with all these sarvakarmashu, all these, understanding all this karma is very contaminated. It's very, it increases the karma granti, the knot of reactionary work. And Veda, they know dukatmanam. They know that material desires will only lead to misery, but this is our situation, parityage api anishvaraha. But they're unable to give them up. Anishvara. Ishvara, of course, we know it means to Lord. I'm unable to be the Lord, to lord over, even though I have this intelligence and we have these shastras, I'm unable to lord over, to control these desires completely. So what do? Tato tata bhajita mam pitta. We worship the Lord happily. And why do we use the word, why did Krishna use the word pitta? Because one has to be happy in devotional service. The soul, we are predominantly ananda, and therefore we must experience pleasure. And if we don't experience pleasure in devotional service, we will automatically be drawn to experiencing pleasure in material life. So one worships, Krishna says, you worship me. You just worship me with this faith, Shraddha Lur. But how do you worship me? Shraddha Lur, Dudanyishchayaha. You worship me very seriously, very faithfully, with great determination. And Jushamanas, and then Jushamanas Chatan Kaman. Then when I actually engage in these activities of sense gratification, Dukodar comes Chagharayan. I should at least realize that these things will again, Krishna repeats, these things will cause misery, and therefore Gharayan, I should be repentant. I should think, I've heard Bhagavad Gita, I've heard the Srimad Bhagavatam, I've heard all these things, but unfortunately, I'm still attracted to material life and material nature. And therefore, my Lord, I pray, I'm sorry about this, but I have these desires and I haven't been able to give them up. So this remembrance, this sword of remembrance causes this faith to manifest. So when you have this sword of transcendental knowledge, and we have this sword of transcendental knowledge, not just knowledge, but knowledge translated into remembering Krishna. Otherwise, the knowledge is remembering Krishna's pastimes, qualities, name, and form. Then we can cut this knot. Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur says, it is the knot of false ego that keeps us tied to the material world. So, in the 10th canto of the Bhagavatam, and this is a very, very, very important verse. So I would request 10:1-4 that you project this verse. This is very, very important verse. Nivrittatar Shire Upagiyamana, that when a person, this explains, otherwise, because the question in this verse is, who would not do this? Who would not do this? Who would not take advantage of this Hari Katha, of this Krishna Katha? No. And so, Nirvittataya Shire, Upagiyam, the Bhagavatam answers in the 10th canto, preparing us. Otherwise, it's here comes the pastimes of Krishna, here comes the qualities of Krishna, here comes the forms of Krishna, here comes so much glorification and names of Krishna. So here's a warning. Nivrittataya Shire, Upagiyamana. Those who have given up the thirst for material enjoyment, for material life, and have instead inclined themselves to the Upagiyamana, to glorifying the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is the medicine, Bhavaushadi. Bhavaushadi, the Aushadi is a disease. So the Bhavaroga, the disease of material existence, Shotramano, if we hear about Krishna freeing ourselves from material activities by this wonderful glorification, Mana Abhiramat, then the mind will be satisfied. We'll experience so much pleasure beyond any pleasure that can be experienced in this material world. And so Uttama Shloka Gunanuvada. So who would not do this? There's the same question. And here's the answer. Pumam Birajita Bina Pashubnat. A person who kills the soul, meaning the impersonalists, or persons who kill animals. Otherwise, persons who engage in destroying their spiritual life by killing animals, by all kinds of, this is specific. Otherwise, people who have other types of sense gratification, they have some hope. But these people, the Mayavadis and the animal killers, even an animal killer has more hope than a Mayavadi. Right? When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was on his way with Nityananda to the house of Advaitacharya to chastise him, because Advaitacharya began to speak speaking the Yoga Sutras of Patanjali and explaining them in an impersonal way. Why did he do that? Because he tried so many times to subjugate himself to the Lord, to be the Lord's servant, but the Lord would always consider him to be senior and to be his worshipable Lord. So many times Advaita tried to counteract that, but it actually ended up in problematic situations where one time the Lord actually said, he ran away. He said, I don't want to be accused like this, like Advaita. Advaita was doing it. Of course, these are all pastimes, but it shows how we should never criticize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Actually, Damodar Pandit, he indirectly criticized the Lord and the Lord accepted what he said, but he sent him away. He sent him on another mission because he could see that there was a danger of criticism, by intimate association. So anyway, so on the way they met this Tantra sannyasi who offered Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Nityananda Prabhu a benediction of happy life, happy marriage. And Lord Chaitanya said, this sounds to me like a curse. And anyway, the sannyasi invited them, so-called sannyasi, invited them in where his tantric servant, who was a woman, served them fruits and vegetables. And then he said, now let us experience some liquid bliss. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu turned to Nityananda and said, what is liquid bliss? And Nityananda said, I think he's speaking about wine. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu jumped up and he said, thank you very much. And they both ran out and jumped in the Ganga. But Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur explains, and also Vrindavan Das Thakur, that the Lord will is willing to save debauchees, people immersed in material activities, but the Mayavadis, unless they give up their Mayavad, no, they will not be able to receive this wonderful mercy of the Lord. And therefore, Shukadeva Goswami speaks this verse. Shukadeva Goswami speaks it because he's saying, if you're in these categories, this 10th canto will not be, you won't be able to understand it. No. So I wanted to go to another point, which is, we spoke about liberation. So there's a very beautiful verse which I would like to read. I don't know if you have access to this verse on that Veda base. This is from Srimad Bhagavatam. I think it's I can't remember which verse it is. It's like the third or fourth verse in the first chapter. But anyway, I'll read the verse, and it starts Jayati Jayati Krishna Prema Bhaktir Yad Angrim. So all glories, to Krishna Prema Bhakti. Not just Krishna Bhakti, because Krishna Bhakti has different levels, like we just spoke about. We have the level of karma or gyan. So all glories to Krishna Prema Bhakti, pure devotional service in mature love. Whose feet? Whose feet? Otherwise, who are we talking about here? Bhakti Devi. All glories to Sri Krishna Prema Bhakti. And then Nikila Nigama Tattva Gudham Agyaya Mukti. Knowing that all the confidential meanings of the Vedas are contained in the lotus feet of Sri Bhakti Devi. Understanding this. Mukti, liberation personified. Bhajati Sharanakama. She took shelter of, she's taking shelter of these Sharanakama, very eager. Kama in this a very, very, very great desire to take shelter of the lotus feet of Bhakti Devi. Why? Unfortunately, Vaishnavais Tyajamana, because she has been rejected by the Vaishnavas. And she's thinking, where will I go? I want to take shelter of the Vaishnavas, but they're ignoring me. They're rejecting me. They don't want liberation. Even if it's offered to them, they're not interested unless Krishna wants them to have liberation. Then they'll accept it. Otherwise, they're not interested. So, then she says, Japta yajana tapasya nasya nisham bihaya. She's giving up her faith or her dependence on these four things. What are these four things? Mantras, penance, sacrifice, and renunciation. Mantras refers to brahmacharis. In the Vedic system, brahmacharis would chant mantras and the hymns of the Vedas, etc., very perfectly, very seriously. And the grihastas yajna, they would do yajnas, they would do sacrifices. And tapasya, the vanaprasthas, they would do tapasya. And nyasa, the sannyasis, the renounced order, they would renounce all material objects. Now, these things, they're hoping by doing these things to get liberation. But Bhakti Devi, what Mukti Devi, she doesn't want liberation. She doesn't want to give this. And actually it's stated in the Vedas or stated in the Bhagavatam, famous verse that akama moksha kama va sarvagam udaradi tivrena bhakti yogena yajita that is stated that if someone has no desires, desires liberation, or is full of material desires, that tivrena, with great sincerity, with intensity, one should perform devotional service. So Srila Prabhupada says that, that because it says moksha kama, even those who have moksha kama, they want liberation, they must perform devotional service. And this is stated in many places throughout the Bhagavatam and the Puranas. So therefore, the impersonalists, you'll see if you go to different temples in India of Lakshmi Narayan, etc., they'll have all kinds of Mayavadis there doing puja, because they understand, if I want liberation, I have to worship the Lord. But if they don't at least have some little trace of bhakti, then they won't get liberation. She says, I don't want to give it to them. No, I don't want to give her these things. So, but Sanatana Goswami, when he comments on his writing, he himself is writing his own purport. He says that if you just have a little bit of bhakti, then you will be assured of liberation in the future. And even if someone is casually trying to perform devotional service, Bhakti Devi, liberation offers herself, because she looks at the face. Sanatana Goswami says she cannot look at the face of Bhakti. She takes shelter of Bhakti Devi's lotus feet, and that means that liberation herself cannot achieve so easily this Krishna Prema Bhakti. But just by taking shelter of the feet of Bhakti Devi, she feels totally protected. She feels like, otherwise indicating that liberation is automatically there, even if you perform devotional service to some degree. She offers herself, and because she sees Bhakti Devi's superiority, and therefore she rejects these people who practice all these things trying to achieve her. And if they're very unfortunate, they will never come to the point of bhakti, and they won't get their liberation. So Bilva Mangala Thakur, he spoke one very beautiful verse that and this was based on his experience, his own experience of coming to the point of Bhava Bhakti and then being distracted. So he says, Bhakti Tvaya Stiratara Bhagavan Yadi Syat. That devotional service to you, O my Lord, Daivena na Palati Divikishwara Murti. I desire that very much, especially to worship you in your Divya Kishwara Murti, in your transcendental youthful form. And then he says, why? Because even liberation herself, with folded hands, Mukti Swayam Mukali Tangjali Sevateshman, even liberation herself stands with folded hands, wanting to serve the person who actually surrenders to you as Nanda Kishore. Dharma Artha Gataya Samaya Pratiksha. That and even all these things, mukte, and even dharma, artha, kama, all these things are accomplished by devotional service. There's no need for performing them separately. So liberation herself. So I just wanted to speak these things because in the verse it speaks about liberation. So a devotee is not interested in liberation. In the beginning of the Nectar of Devotion, Srila Prabhupada quotes from the teachings of Kapila Dev that the only reason a devotee will accept liberation is if Krishna wants it. Otherwise, the devotee is not interested in liberation, even in attaining the same planet of the Lord, or the same form of the Lord, or being involved in the activities of the Lord. A devotee simply wants to serve. And if Krishna wants to engage the devotee in that particular way, then the devotee will be happy, okay, but he's not looking for the liberation, he's looking for the service. So this is very elevated. This is Krishna Prema Bhakti. Rupa Goswami, he speaks about this particular Krishna Prema Bhakti in one famous verse that that verse go. I haven't recited it for a long time. Krishna Bhakti Matir. I'm trying to remember the verse. Krishna Bhakti Matir. Can't remember the whole verse. I'm just looking quickly here on my computer to see if I can find it. Anyway, I forgot the verse. It's been a long time since I recited it. But Rupa Goswami, Krishna Bhakti Matir. Can't remember it. I don't know if anybody out there remembers that verse, but it's this beautiful verse that Krishna. Anyway, I can't remember it right now, unfortunately. But what Rupa Goswami says, if one wants pure devotional service, there's only one price, and that price is laulyam. So okay, I think I might find the verse now. Here it is. I'm sorry it took so long. Krishna Bhakti Rasa Mati. Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita Mati. And it's very interesting. This is, you could put it on the screen if you like. It's Madhya Lila. It's quoted in Madhya Lila 8, text number 7. Krishna Bhakti Rasa Bhavita. Srila Prabhupada explained that this verse, this is where he got the idea of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. He spoke with some God brothers and they had different ideas. You should call your movement the Krishna Bhakti Rasa movement. They gave him different ideas. But then from this verse, Srila Prabhupada got the idea, International Society for Krishna Consciousness, Krishna Bhakti Rasa, Bhavita Mati. Mati means intelligence or consciousness. So if one wants this, Krishna Bhakti Rasa, to be absorbed in the mellows of devotional service, kriyatam yadikutopi lapyate. One should be willing to pay the price. And what is that price? Tatra laulyam apimulyam ekalam. That one should be greedy. One has to be greedy for Krishna. Otherwise, greedy for Krishna means, because greed generally we see as something negative, but if one is greedy for Krishna, then that greed takes us to the point of desiring Krishna. When we're greedy for something, we want it more than anything else. Like somebody's greedy for money, that's generally the greed we're absorbed and we're associated with or we're familiar with. So that type of greed is, we think about money. So if we're greedy for Krishna, we think about Krishna. And then Rupa Goswami says, Janma koti sukritaya na labhyate. One cannot attain this even with thousands and thousands of lives of pious activities. So this is a beautiful, beautiful verse that unfortunately I hadn't recited it for so many years. I couldn't remember it, but this is what we should aspire for. I want Krishna. I remember that Srila Prabhupada said in one class, he said, if you want Krishna more than anything else, then Krishna will facilitate you. Krishna will give you the ability to attain him. But you have to have that intensity, not just a declaration, but it has to permeate your consciousness, permeate your existence, permeate your sensual activities, permeate your mind. Then it will become a reality. So anyway, these are some points I wanted to mention on this particular verse. So now, if there are any questions or comments, I'll do my best to try to answer them.
Maharaj, in the verse that we read tonight, Prabhupada used the word overcoat.
Uses the word what? I'm sorry?
Used the word overcoat several times. I think in the first paragraph of the purport, to overcoat with bhakti and so forth. Can you comment on that?
Let me go back to the verse. No. You're speaking about the verse today, today's verse?
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. Let me just go back because I had already gone out of there. So you said which word? I had to turn up my volume.
In the purport, he used the word overcoat. I think in the second paragraph.
Mm-hmm.
He said it several times.
Overcoat.
Yeah, could you comment on?
Well, it means that bhakti, we should want to perform bhakti in the pure form of bhakti. But overcoated means when the bhakti is because just like some people have intellectual tendency, so they may overcoat their bhakti with this, this tendency, this desire, this ability that they have, intellectual ability. So they may be understanding bhakti through knowledge and not as a service to Krishna, but as an intellectual. So they're intellectually performing bhakti. But, it's tainted with a desire to have knowledge, to understand, instead of just wanting to serve. So that's overcoating. And someone who's very attracted to, as Srila Prabhupada said, family, society, and love. One's attracted to the activities, to the nice, pious activities of this world. Then their bhakti will be overcoated or will be tainted with, this desire. But they want to serve. They understand. I want to serve Krishna. That we can, especially in that case, even in both cases, we can go back to 11:20, 7:20, 28, which we just spoke about. That if you develop your faith by hearing properly, then even though these taints are there or these overcoatings are there, then ultimately by hearing about Krishna, that matkatashu, when one develops faith by matkatashu, by hearing about Krishna, then ultimately bhakti becomes predominant, as Srila Prabhupada mentions, and then these other things will go to the wayside. Of course, we have to make that happen, we have to carefully execute bhakti under the guidance of Sri Guru and the Vaishnavas, not just some intellectual effort or some personal. Srila Prabhupada, I was just reading the other day, I was preparing a little bit the consciousness of Nityananda's appearance day. So I was reading one in one of the verses in the 6th chapter of Adi Lila, Srila Prabhupada speaks about, the verse speaks about, I think it's where it's quoted in there by Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami, that Brahma Samhita, and Srila Prabhupada in long purport, he says that, that when one is very serious about devotional service, that these things will gradually go away, but one has to perform devotional service very carefully, and one has to especially understand that there's no difference between Goloka Vrindavan and the Vrindavan in this world, and there's no difference between Krishna in Goloka Vrindavan and the deity form. When one fully realizes that, one will understand that the deity is not made of marble or of stone. It's actually not made of that. That Krishna has united these elements so that those who cannot understand his transcendental form, which is right there, they can see that here is a murti of Krishna. But when one is actually pure, one sees the original body of Krishna in the deity of the Lord. So Prabhupada says, in our neophyte stage, it may be difficult to understand this, but if we continue in our devotional service, when we're in Vrindavan, we will actually see the original Vrindavan. We won't see the old buildings and the pigs eating stool out of the gutter and the monkeys stealing your fruit when you go to the market. And you won't see this. You'll see Nanda Maharaj's house. You'll see Krishna coming home after herding the cows. So this, but if we still have some attachment to Gyan or karma or yoga, then these things, then we'll practice bhakti with that little attachment. But if we're very serious in our bhakti and surrendering and associating with the Vaishnavas, then those other things will go away. Is that okay?
Yes, very good. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Kishori Priya.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam, Jai Shri Prabhupada. I have a question. Sometimes when we hear, or rather maybe when we are speaking to others, or maybe just ourselves intellectually, when we are thinking of the pastimes of Krishna, for example, when he kills Putana, or in his Narasimha avatar, when he killed Hiranyakashipu, we say Putana is a symbolic of ignorance.
Mm-hmm.
And Hiranyakashipu represents the false ego.
Mm-hmm.
So when we do that, are we kind of belittling the pastimes of the Lord? Is it due to a tendency towards Mayavad to do that?
If these comparisons are mostly given by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, but what he says again and again is that Krishna, his unlimited potency is so great that from his pastimes he can teach us. But if we think that this is just some, someone is, some Narada Muni or Sukadeva Goswami speaking these things to teach us something, then that becomes tainted. Otherwise, if we don't see that the reality is that Krishna is enjoying himself, but he's so powerful and he's so capable that while he's enjoying these pastimes, he can teach us so many things. There's so many levels of understanding because Krishna is unlimited. Therefore, whatever Krishna does has unlimited ramifications. And if a devotee should think like that.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Krishna. So, Raghava Chaitanya Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, please accept obeisances. All glories to Srila Prabhupada and Gurudeva. So, the question I want to ask is, when I joined late, please apologize for that. And when I joined, actually, I was listening on Lakshmi Narayana. I did not completely understand, but instantly, I'm just reading very slow pace on Srimad Bhagavatam. I was in the Canto 6 and Chapter 19 that talks about Lakshmi Narayana Puja, complete like something. So I was just trying to understand what you're saying about Lakshmi Narayan, Mayavad or something. Maharaj.
So I'm just trying to understand. Can you just, Lakshmi Narayan, I'm not sure I fully understand that question. No. Otherwise,
Lakshmi Narayana worship, and is it related with the Mayavadis or something?
oh, no. Even Radha Krishna, Lakshmi, it's just that Mayavadis generally, they cannot get access to Radha Krishna. No. Just like one time I was in Tirupati. And so, I was there, and while we were waiting for the darshan, the pujaris invited us just to go into the altar pujari area. And I saw all these Mayavadis, doing this, mixing this. And so I asked the pujari, and what is this? And he said, oh, actually, according to Shastra, if the Mayavadis don't perform devotional service, then they will not achieve liberation. So we're giving them that facility, and we're hoping that they can give up by association, they can give up their desire for liberation and actually take up devotional service. But actually, so I was saying Lakshmi Narayan because my experience is that generally speaking, you see them in Lakshmi Narayan temples. Like if you go to Trivandrum and, what is that temple?
Sri Rangam?
Yeah. No, not Sri Rangam. In
Ananta Padmanabha Swami.
Padmanabha Swami temple. If you go to the Padmanabha Swami, practically all the priests they're all not Mayavadis. Or you go to the Adikeshava temple a little farther to south, they're all Mayavadis. And so that because they understand that we have to do this to get our liberation. But this is Krishna's trick, because even if they don't give up the desire for liberation and they don't get the liberation, they have performed devotional service unwittingly, unwillingly, and they will get the benefit. They've begun the path of bhakti, which will, Krishna says the benefit will always be there. So that's what I was referring to, not saying that Lakshmi Narayan is associated with Mayavadis. Hare Krishna. Bhagavan Narada.
Hi, Krishna, Guru Maharaj, my obeisances. I have a question. You were speaking about, following the Guru. Sometimes, there's a certain danger when we reach a certain age. I've seen in kind of older devotees, or I even fear for myself, maybe when I hit age 50, I no longer seek to take shiksha or direction from somebody, or certain devotees where maybe their guru is no longer around and they're just kind of doing their own thing. As a younger aspiring devotee, sometimes there's challenges with those individuals. Like, how do I approach that when they're not really taking instruction from anybody, or in general, how do we avoid this sort of pitfall?
I was just reading the other day, Prabhupada said that in Kali Yuga, the tendency is I do everything, I worship God as I see fit. So my personal experience is that about 80% of the people in our movement, that's what they're doing. Otherwise, they have a guru, but after some years, they just think, well, it's like this, or they get interested in some social issue like, ecology, or and they take it so seriously that it becomes part of their bhakti instead of what it should be, which is a way to engage people in devotional service by giving them association in it's a nice thing to do, but it's upadharma. It's not really something very elevated. So, devotees, sometimes we fall into this because Srila Prabhupada one time said, if you go fishing, of course, we don't usually fish, but it's an example. If you go fishing, be sure you don't get pulled in. No. Otherwise, Prabhupada was saying, if you're going out to preach or perform devotional service and you're mixing with the materialistic people, don't take up their habits. Prabhupada said, we want to give them the association, but we don't want to take their association. But sometimes being in an environment so full of karma kanda, sometimes we become attracted to it. No? And then we get this mixture of karma misra bhakti. And then when you get that, or sometimes something happens, or somebody falls down, or some big personality has some problem, or you get some chastisement, or some problem in ISKCON, and then this latent desire to justify my desire for karma or gyan becomes manifest, and that becomes our excuse. So instead of, therefore, Bhaktivinoda Thakur said, even if everyone gives up devotional service except for me, and I'm the only one left, my faith will not be affected in the least. That's how strong our faith should be. That if everybody left, if every devotee just fell into Maya, which is not going to happen, but if it did, he's just speaking a superlative, that even if that situation existed, I would not lose my faith in the least. So that's, it's an unfortunate thing. How do we protect ourselves from it? We always, there's one verse, which, a very beautiful verse from Chaitanya Charitamrita, instructions to Sanatana Goswami. So I'm trying to remember it. See if I can find it real quick, because I forgot it, but I think it right here. Here it is. It's Madhya Lila 2283. Krishna Bhakti Janma Mula Hoy Saru Sangha, which means the root cause of devotional service to Lord Krishna is association with advanced devotees. Krishna Prema Janme, but once even that Krishna Prema has manifested in the heart, Tengho Puna Mukha Anga, still association devotees is the Mukhya Anga, the most important aspect. So the greatest protection we have all through our engagement in devotional service is to remain. That's why when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu said, of all practices, what is the most essential to Ramananda Roy? Ramananda Roy said the association of devotees. And when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu mentions the 5 most important angas of devotional service, what is the first thing he says? Sadhu Sangha, Krishna Nam, Bhagavata Shravana. First thing, Sadhu Sangha. Because without Sadhu Sangha, there won't be any Krishna Nam, nor will there be any, you won't be attracted. If you don't associate with devotees, how will you even know about Krishna's name? And Bhagavata Shravana, how will we be engaged in hearing the Bhagavatam? So association with devotees at every step, we can't fall into the offensive mentality. Oh, this devotee's like this one's like this. I was just mentioning today in the Bhagavatam class that when one Skanda Purana says there are 6 things which lead to a hellish mentality. Killing a devotee means killing a devotee's faith. Offending a devotee and being envious of a devotee, not wanting to offer respects to a devotee, becoming angry with a devotee, or not being happy to see a devotee. These things will lead us to hellish mentality. So even if we don't agree with someone, even if somebody did something, we should still be happy to see them. Even we may be maintaining a distance, but if we see them, we're happy. Here's a Vaishnava. And so this is how important Vaishnavas are in our life.
Sometimes that can be very difficult.
Oh, yes, very difficult. It can be, but that's our challenge, not to fall into the this mentality, dangerous mentality.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So someone's asking in the chat, I don't know why it's not appearing, the verse on Krishna Bhakti Rasa. No.
I got it, Maharaj. It is
You got
CC.
it?
Yeah, someone responded directly to me. CC Madhya 870. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. Okay. Any other questions? Anyway, here's Chakrapani from Trinidad, all the way from the Caribbean. Chakrapani.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Gurudev.
Hare Krishna.
Yeah, Gurudev, how we identify that the remembering of the pastime of the Lord is a sentimental one or is a real one?
How do we know if our remembrance is sentimental or real or pure bhakti? Well, sentimental means that we're attracted. Otherwise, we're mixing just like let's say I see the deity. So if I see the deity as Krishna, here is Krishna, here is Radha and Krishna, here is Gaur-Nitai, my worshipable lords. And it increases my bhakti, my desire to serve them. That's serious devotional service. But if I see the Radha Krishna, look at how Krishna is so pretty, Radha is so pretty. I really enjoy their beauty. Now, then we become the enjoyer, and they become the servant. They're giving me pleasure. Now they do give us pleasure, but that should not be my mentality. So that's a basic difference. Sentimentality means that there's a mixture of my own desire, my own perception, rather than just an attitude of service.
Gracias, Gurudev.
Hare Krishna. So if there are no more questions, I want to thank everyone for giving me this opportunity to perform some service. I hope that it had made some contribution to your devotional service, and I'll be happy to be with you again. I think we have scheduled for 2 weeks from today, right? Bhagavad Gita.
Yes, Maharaj, I think that's the 24th.
Okay, so I'll be anxiously awaiting to be with you all again at that time.
Thank you so much, Maharaj, for joining us and for sharing your knowledge and realization with us.
There's Navina Nirada Prabhu in San Antonio. Sorry, I just saw his lotus face, and one of my favorite Sankirtan devotees. Oh, Dana Kelly Prabhu. Wow. I'm missing all the nectar in San Antonio, being down here south. Hare Krishna. Sorry for that interruption. Just you see these two ecstatic devotees, and especially Donna Kelly with less fuzz, no? Wonderful. Hare Krishna.